over to Reverend Ito Sensei.
Hey, well, thank you, Koichi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important and very timely seminar entitled SDGs and Buddhism. I would like to thank the Bay Area Buddhist Association for organizing and putting on this event, and also my personal thanks to them for inviting me to be a part of it. Working with the committee and accessing all of the information that we've received and watching the video right now, I realize how very important this subject is for all of us, and also realize um, how important it is that we as Buddhists get involved. I certainly don't have any expertise or special knowledge on this subject, and so all I can do is share some of my perspectives with you today. Now that I am firmly entrenched in my 70s, I worry about the world that we are leaving behind for our children and grandchildren, and for those to come in the future. And I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to learn more about what we can do. I know that you've all looked at the information that we received, and you know that there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and that this came about in 2015, developed after the Millennium Development Goals that were first proposed at the United Nations in 2000, in the year 2000. And when I look over the list, you know, there are 17, and I think that 12 have to do with human inequalities, like no poverty, to rid our world of poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and so forth. And then I think that there are 5 specifically that look at the environment and the kind of things that, well, the destruction of the environment as we have seen for so many decades. Clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, climate action, life below water, and life on land. These goals are important for us living here in the United States, but the countries that we used to refer to as third world or developing countries are suffering from these problems much more than those countries like Japan and the United States. By the way, I found out that more contemporary ways, perhaps more politically correct ways of referring to haves and have-nots are the use of such terms as global north and global south, or minority and majority worlds, minority being the haves and the majority being the have-nots. Almost halfway through December, we can look back and see that 2020 has been a year that has turned our lives upside down, and will be remembered by all of us who have lived through it. As of today, the pandemic has claimed almost 300,000 Americans and some 1.6 million people throughout the world. There is much hope that the vaccines will finally put an end to the nightmare, but we will continue to live with COVID-19 pandemic through probably a good portion of 2021. And I am sure that in the countries that are not as affluent as the so-called global north, not as affluent as the so-called global north countries are suffering even more than we are. The pandemic also showed the inequalities in the United States. So many people lost their jobs. Most families are experiencing loss of income, which has led to losing their homes and the growing inability to feed their families. Even more than in previous years, we see firsthand the inequalities between the haves and the have-nots. But the realization comes that it's even worse, much worse in other countries. And then in the United States, the political situation uncovered the depth of racial inequality. We seem more divided than at any time in recent history, at least within the 65 years that I've been living in this country. So the question is, what can Buddhism do to help this dire situation? One of our primary teachings, as you know, is interconnectedness. There is the teaching of Indra's net, which tells us that we are all intertwined. So we can see that we're all in this together. The tendency is to think that everyone is on their own, that as long as I take care of myself, my family, my circle of friends, the members of our temple, everything is all right. But Buddhism says that we are all interconnected, and not only that, we're interdependent. We depend on each other. We are part of a greater global family. And so it is this truth that should make ourselves turn outward and think about the topics put forth by the United Nations, the problems that need to be acknowledged and eventually resolved. This is why I think we as Buddhists need to be involved in this program to reach those sustainable development goals by 2030. 9 years is not much time for such a far-reaching project, but making the effort is what's important. We are dependent on the other lives, on other lives for our sustenance, for our happiness, for our survival. And at the same time, we have the responsibility to take care of others, especially those who are less fortunate than ourselves, and also to take care of Mother Earth. So it is these two areas, caring for human beings and our environment, of the nature that we are responsible for. In one of the explanations of this topic, it summarizes the areas that need to be addressed as poverty and hunger, correcting inequality, environmental conservation, and the realization of a peaceful world. That pretty much sums it up. And the other very important goal is leaving no one behind. Like all other Buddhists, we who are members of the Jodo Shinshu or Shin Buddhist tradition are encouraged to do our best to be a part of the solution, to show our concern and our compassion to others, especially to those who are suffering, to those who are less fortunate than ourselves. But central to our teaching is the concept of Bombu, that we are ordinary and not very capable human beings, that our acts of compassion are limited, that we are basically living self-centered lives. We're encouraged to listen to others, to help when we can, and so forth. But our spiritual forebear, Shinran Shonin, said that he is capable only of small or limited compassion, that only Amida Buddha is capable of great compassion. This teaching, I believe, is to keep us in our place, to maintain a humble attitude, which, if it is not genuine, then it becomes another expression of self-pride. That attitude is also to prevent us from being too proud of our acts of sharing and giving. I often explain that the word for compassion in Japanese is jihi, made up of two characters, itsukushimi, which is compassion, and kanashimi, which is sadness. That sadness is for us to experience or to feel the pain, the suffering of others, as if it was our own pain. By being able to do that, we experience the pain of others and in turn can push us to help as best as we can. Such an attitude will encourage us to look more seriously in the ways that people throughout the world live in poverty, where there is no clean water, sufficient nutritious food, a lack of quality education, decent health care, and so forth. Back about 5 or 6 years ago, I escorted a group of young people on a study tour to Japan. We were at the retreat center at our Honzan, our mother temple, there for 3 days. In the hallways of the center, there are always some Dharma messages, hogo, usually of prominent Higashi Honganji teachers. But that particular year, there was one that caught my eye, and it was a statement attributed to a Japanese singer named Utada-Hikaru. I was introduced to her music by my daughter many, many years ago, back almost probably 20 years ago. At any rate, this is what she wrote. In Japanese, 日本人が幸福で豊かな生活をするためには、アフリカでたくさんの子供が餓死しなければならない。それが見えない。見ようとしない。I translated that as many children die of nutrition in Africa so that Japanese can enjoy a lifestyle of happiness and abundance. They can't see that reality. They don't even They don't even try to see that reality. And underneath those words, there was an introduction to her. An American-born singer-songwriter made a huge impact on the Japan music scene in 2000. Her first hit, First Love, set a record as the highest-selling single in the country. In 2010, she took a leave of absence from her musical career to focus on her work to advance the cause of such problems as malnutrition among children in developing countries around the world. More recently, another very talented Japanese, Naomi Osaka, took it upon herself to express her concern for the young African Americans who have been the victims of racial inequality at the US Open tennis tournament. I think by looking at the examples of people like that and then becoming aware of this Sustainable Development Goals project, it will educate us about the dire situations throughout the world and even in our country, where there are so many who live in poverty or are the objects of racial or gender or any other types of discrimination and inequality. Regarding the environment also, we see the effects of global warming, even here where we live, the wildfires that are now every year occurrences, the hurricanes and tornadoes, extreme temperatures and so forth. We've lost the ability to live in harmony with nature. Our cities are concrete jungles. This year, because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to go to Japan for meetings and events in Kyoto. But I usually do have the opportunity to go at least once a year. And I always enjoy being in Kyoto, where our headquarters, our mother temple is. Way back almost 50 years ago, I had the chance to live there for 4 years as a student. The appreciation of nature is so much deeper than it is here in the United States. So many beautiful temples and gardens. We do have botanical gardens here, but it's just not the same. That idea of living together with nature is a perspective that certainly can benefit us here in the United States. Buddhism encourages a more respectful and appreciative way of living, a way in which we live together in harmony with all other human beings and with nature. I'd like to end my talk by sharing with you some modern Buddhist poems that I've tried to translate into English. I should explain that modern poems are more freeform, more like prose than poetry. These are my feeble attempts to put them into English, and I will end with a poem by an American Buddhist poet as well. The simple lessons from them give us a simple but powerful message as to how we are and how we should be living our everyday lives, interdependent on all human beings and all of life. The first one is written by a poet named Mado Michio, and this poem in Japanese is called Itsukara, which I translate as "Since when?" When did we start hating the ground that we walk on? Not only do we wear shoes, but even socks, and curse whenever even a smudge of dirt soils our feet. When did we start hating water? We put on raincoats and carry umbrellas, and even put on rubber galoshes, and shudder whenever even a drop of rain gets on our body. When did we start hating the sun and the air? Not only do we don underwear and pants and shirts to cover ourselves, and even a hat to protect our head. Heaven forbid if we should be exposed to the sun and the air. When did it happen that we got to despise the earth, the water, the sun, and the air? True happiness will never come to us so busy hiding from the nature that surrounds us. Another is a poem written by a poet by the name of Eiji Enomoto called Cooking, or Jisui. On the shelf I see the green onions, the radishes, the carrots, sitting as if to wait their turn to nourish a fool such as me. And then a couple of poems by a young sensitive woman named Misuzu Kaneko, who lived in the early 20s. This first poem is called The Great Catch. It goes like this. In the warm glow of daybreak, I hear the fishermen shouting, a big catch, a big catch, a big catch of sardines. On the shore, a festival to enjoy. In the ocean, a funeral service of sardines for the tens of thousands of families and friends lost in the big catch. And then the other is called Fish or Sakana. I feel sorry for the fish in the ocean. Rice are cultivated carefully by farmers. Cows are taken care of by the ranchers. Even carp are given food to eat. But the fish in the ocean are left to fend for themselves. They do nothing to bother us humans, and yet they end up being eaten by me. I feel so sorry for the fish in the ocean. And finally, a poem written by an American Zen Buddhist, Cecilia Kapua Lindo. From time to time, I too am misled by the myth that exalts the independent self-made man. Upon hearing the voice of the enlightened one, any air of self-importance is deflated like an empty balloon. And I become aware that my existence depends upon the many lives that are slain for me each time I sit down to eat my meal. These poems remind us in simple ways that we are the culprits. It's so easy to point fingers and say, it's those people who are to blame for the problems that we see in the world. It's because of them that we need to learn about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, to help heal the world. But Buddhism reminds us that we are at fault and that we need to become more aware of the problems we are causing due to our irresponsible ways of living. I encourage all of you to share the lessons we will learn today with the members of our temples and really with everyone that we share our lives with. Thanks again for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I look forward to listening to your perspectives and experiences. Namu Kia Butsu, Namu Kia Ho, Namu Kia So. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sensei, for that very wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I've had the wonderful pleasure of having to hear Ito Sensei on many occasions. So thank you once again for sharing with us.